Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Visiting Writer Series. I'm Natanya Pulley. I teach fiction and Native American writers in the English department. This series is sponsored by Colorado College English Department with the support of the McLean Visiting Writers Endowment. And a recording of tonight's events will be available on the English Department Visiting Writer Series page. I'm going to put that link in the chat right now. And we also have a listserv. So please join our listserv for updates, links, all of the things that you need to be part of to join the Visiting Writer Series. There we go. Colorado College is located in Colorado Springs, Colorado, within the unceded territory of the Ute people. The earliest documented peoples also include the Arapaho, the Apache, Comanche, and Cheyenne. And an extended list of tribes with a legacy of occupation in Colorado can be found on our Indigenous community at CC Land Acknowledgement page. And I will put that link in as well, if you want to check it out. There you go. A land acknowledgement can also be a reminder to focus on our contributions to the Indigenous communities around us and to consider how we are supporting Indigenous peoples of the past and the present and towards the future. So next Friday, March 4th at 1:30, there'll be a documentary screening and Q&A on Indigenous-led conservation of the Bears Ears National Monument. This is in the Cornerstone Screening Room. And more Indigenous focused events can also be found on the Indigenous community page at CC. I am excited to welcome our writer tonight, the Denver writer Hillary Leftwich. She's also going to be a block visitor in Block 7 for our creative writing senior thesis course. Hillary has 3 books out or forthcoming. You know what? Their titles are no joke. Her fiction collection is called Ghosts Are Just Strangers Who Know How to Knock. And her forthcoming memoir is titled Aura. She will also have a book of poetry and hybrid works, Saint Dymphna's Playbook, coming out in 2023. Hillary's approach to writing and creating, processing, and just generally being an awesome person in the world is a lot like her titles of her books. It's otherworldly, enchanted, and spectral, a journey of the senses and myth-making. Her writing has been described as haunting and gut-wrenching, dark, funny, and transcendent. And I like this quote, especially for her collection. Each page is a different kind of human storm. We enter worlds and characters that are vulnerable, snarky, cursed, beloved, and raw in all of her work. And I'm so excited for you all to hear her and for our seniors to have a chance to work with her next block. Hillary received her MFA in fiction and poetry from the Mile High MFA at Regis University. She reads and selects and has been a judge for the Colorado Book Awards. She's a Kenyon Review Scholarship alumna. Her writing has been published in print and online, and you can go to her webpage to see any of these or to find links to them. She's been published in Best Small Fictions, The Rumpus, Entropy, Denver Quarterly, and many, many others. She's the owner of Alchemy Author Services and Writing Workshop. She teaches creative writing at Lighthouse Writers and University of Denver's College of Professional Studies, and she lives in Denver with her partner, son, and their cat, Larry, where she also hosts and organizes a series called At the Inkwell Denver. It's a literary reading series and a liberated space for all voices. Thank you so much for joining us, Hillary. So happy you're here and looking forward to hearing from you today.
Thank you so much, Natanya, for that introduction. And I just want to give thanks to you for inviting me to this opportunity and inviting me to come teach with you in March. I'm so excited to be part of the CC community and such a great opportunity, this reading. So feel very blessed and very grateful. So thank you, Natanya, so much. And thank you to CC for having me. I wish I could be there in person, but as it turns out, I'm in Denver and Monument Hill is no joke. So thank you for pivoting to virtual at the last minute. I know we're so sick of Zoom at this point, so I appreciate anyone on here who is sitting through yet another Zoom. I appreciate it. And I also want to give thanks to Natania's students. I met with them today for about an hour, and such wonderful students and writers. And I'm really excited to be able to work with them. And so, yes, thank you for allowing me into your space today. I'm just going to read a couple of pieces, couple from my book here, and then some pieces from my forthcoming memoir, Aura, which will be out with Future Tense Books this summer. So I do want to give a shout out really quick to Matthias Splalina and Eric Baus for introducing me to prose poetry, which I am now love and obsessed with. So thank you. Thank you both. This first piece is from Ghosts Are Just Strangers Who Know How to Knock. It's called The Ocean Resonates in Empty Spaces. And I wrote this originally for my son. I knew I would make you out of shining strands of hair and the smooth shells I collected that day on the beach. They were pink and soft like the inside of a baby's ear. There were too many shells to pick from, so I carried all of them home with me. The weight of the shells damaged my hands, and I could not piece you perfectly together. You stood in front of me and wobbled. You reached out to touch me, but I could not touch you back with my fractured hands. You started to cry, but instead of tears, I heard the ocean. I reached out my arms to you while my hands dangled like two broken birds from my wrists. Ours is just a little sorrow, I said. And this next piece is called Huckleberry. You are walking through a forest. It is dusk and you see a field full of wildflowers in the distance. You want to smell the flowers, but a river is blocking your way. The river is not swollen, so you decide to cross. When your feet enter the water, you realize the water is hot. You look down and see the river is hot chocolate. Marshmallows bob and mounds of whipped cream become stuck on the sides of your legs. You look up and see a man standing on the other side of the river. He is beckoning to you. He's wearing a black cowboy hat, a black suit, and has a dark, swirly mustache. You realize it is Val Kilmer from the movie Tombstone. You hear him shouting something, but the river drowns his words. You walk faster, and as you do, you reach down to scoop up the marshmallows and eat them. Your mouth is full when you reach Val Kilmer. He looks at you and says, "I'm your huckleberry." He starts coughing up blood into his hands. He looks down at the blood and then looks at you. You take a closer look at him and realize he is not Val Kilmer at all, but your friend who died years ago. You open your mouth to say what you never had the chance to say, but all that comes out is a tiny white cloud. Okay. This next piece is called Firmament, and it talks a lot about Nikola Tesla, who I am very much obsessed with and love to research and study. So this was an interesting piece for me to write. I want to begin at the beginning, to talk about lightning, how two electrically charged clouds make a connection between cloud and ground. Consider how one bolt of lightning can hold 1 billion volts. Consider how one body can hold 45 volts before it will die. Nikola Tesla was born during a lightning storm. The midwife overseeing his birth declared this as a bad omen. She said, "This child will be a child of darkness." But Tesla's mother said, "No, he will be a child of light." This kind of connection exists in my life. It isn't easy to explain. This electricity exists both in nature as well as my son's brain. This makes his life a cloud. A cloud is an aura, a warning, the first symptom of a seizure. There is a period between the start of an aura and the first seizure, a time when he sees lights, hallucinations. This is the time the ghosts unveil themselves, pushing the curtain aside that traps the living from the dead. In 1901, Tesla invented the first electronic voice phenomena device, or spirit radio. He managed to find the exact frequency to talk to ghosts. Tesla was terrified after listening to his first transmission, saying, "The sounds I am listening to at first sound like human voices conversing back and forth in a language I cannot understand." Tesla was a child of lightning. In creating his Tesla coil, he knew the amount of energy used must be massive enough to cause the magnetic field to collapse. It would generate an electric current and the voltage necessary within the air. If he was correct, the energy between the two coils would erupt in a charge, causing a massive burst of electrical current, illuminating with no wire connection. Tesla had invented his own lightning. In Greek mythology, Zeus is the sky god who controls lightning. Tesla understood it can never be about control. It's always about chaos. There is something beautiful in what terrifies us. The EEG spikes on my son's brainwaves are almost identical in nature to the contractions during my labor. That waves can be so similar in life and in death seems to make an incomplete circle complete. But nothing is ever finalized, not even in death. Admit you have reached out to touch a flame, considered the jump, felt a cold blade against hot fingers. Think about why chaos had to happen in order to be born. There is a theory based on chaotic systems in our brains. The epileptic brain drives itself from chaos back to order. A seizure happens only when the brain attempts to save itself from order back to chaos. Think about why you want chaos when everyone else hopes for order. I'm trying to tell you of my own hot fingers. Tesla once said, "We are held together like stars in the firmament with ties inseparable." If a seizure lasts longer than 5 minutes or happens in a series, status ellipticus can occur. This is a continuous state of seizure. This is lightning inside of a brain. Think of the times you wanted order when everyone else hoped for chaos. Count the number of seconds after a flash of lightning and before thunder can be heard. Divide this number by 5. This is how close the bolt is to striking you. I am trying to tell you I am terrified in a language you cannot understand. I am trying to tell you I will save you and return you back to chaos. This next piece is called Songs of Survival. The next 2 pieces are excerpts from my memoir. The bedroom was almost packed, leaving bare walls and a hollowness that felt like bird bones scattered to the winds. The mattress frame dismantled and folded, a praying mantis ready to open its body and suck me back inside, leaned in the corner by the window. The box spring and mattress were naked, save for a small woven blanket and 2 stained pillows without their cases, unable to hide the years that would never be washed away. The sun was halfway through a descent into night, catching the small room on fire with an orange haze too bright to be anything but another pollution palette color to marvel at. And you, lying on the floor between the mattress and the closet in your Scooby-Doo pajamas, feet splayed apart, balled fists at your side, neck stretched and throat exposed, eyes rolled into the back of your head. A poster child for seizure. I checked the time on my phone, 5:43, and smoothed your hair as I always do, not sure if you could hear me. When doctors say they don't know everything about the brain's mysteries, maybe this meant you could hear me. Time moved as if drowning in syrup as my phone showcased 5:53. 10 minutes had passed. 10 minutes and your seizure refused to stop. Time to go. We bought McDonald's and we never bought McDonald's. Still, the food was packed and the refrigerator already emptied. Our half-empty burger wrappers flapped as if given wings in the breeze of the ceiling fan. Before, there were routines in place, bedtime stories filled with sleepy smells of lavender bathwash, and my words bouncing through the air of your room as they gave birth to terrible neon dragons, breathing flames of purple and pink. Your face scrunched in concern as I told you dragons weren't real, monsters especially, but I knew it was a lie. Mothers don't lie unless it's meant to protect our children, and even then, it's a double-edged sword. Your neurologist told me stress brings about seizures, but no one could have warned me of what was to come. A life pregnant with terror and survivor songs that led us to a pattern of running, always running. Fear sunk into the slow, calculated world of seconds and minutes. I picked you up again into my arms and ran down the set of stairs leading to the parking lot, set you inside of the car and drove you back, even though we just left the sterilized ER with its cutting, crisp noises and sharp smells, even though they said you were stable. And I had grown tired of words that spoke of comfort and grounding when they are as thin as the air in the hospital hallways. And I knew about careless words. We had lived lifetimes of them. Scooby-Doo pajamas looked out of place in a hospital, but then again, so did children. The wires were hooked up to your head once again, and the waves of electricity from your poor, tired brain showed themselves as angry black waves on the computer above your hospital bed. And I could do nothing else with time or protective lies, and I could no longer run. Instead, I sang our songs of survival as the waves of electricity continued to rise and fall. And this last piece is called The Book of Water. When the plans had been made and the airplane ticket bought, when Seattle becomes a word evoked by a higher power, when the images of a cold ocean and damp sea moss can be spun into a blanket of comfort and hope, when unknowingly becoming pregnant throws a choice in your face you were forced to reckon, when you say goodbye to possible oceans and remember how cruel mountains can be, while looking down at the two parallel lines in a small window of a pregnancy stick and seeing an ocean within the blue, to consider an unborn child into a child born, to decide between freedom and life. The Pacific Ocean's tides impact Earth by shaping it slightly, a few inches. The rise and descent of a mother's labor impact the dilation of her cervix leading into childbirth. Each peak and collapse of my contractions remind me of the ocean I likely will never see. An ocean ruled by ancient gods, not goddesses. But to me, each rolling wave speaks of womanhood, of motherhood, giving of everything we have within us as the tides push, pulling back our gifts as if to say, don't give someone all of you when they take everything from you. They say babies can instinctively slow their heart rate and breathe underwater in what's called bradycardic response. Most babies know to hold their breath in water, as if the connection between the amniotic fluid has yet to be forgotten. As if we could, if we wanted, return to our wombs and forget the world that will kill us. In Colorado, there are no oceans, no bodies of water, or damp driftwood crisscrossing rocky beaches. Here, I am all mountains and dryness, scorching summer sun and sharp pine needles, the smell of wildfires, burning aspens, and the sounds of animals dying. We are miles above sea level with acrid skies and no rain, no tides or salt or seaweed. But we are made of water. Perhaps one day I will return. Mother, the Latin root matra, mother, ancestress, a woman from whom a person is descended, to give up her own life, to give life, to give of life, to surrender to tides as they push and pull, give and take. I dream of oceans the color of seabeds and mermaid tails, the lull of the waves rocking me like secret lullabies. I dream of an ocean that is too distant and too cold to touch, of goddesses ruling the waters and repossessing their tides, leaving behind nothing but broken shells and heavy stones no one will ever be able to carry. To hear their voices still within the broken waters, as if to say, slow your heart, hold your breath, and one day you will return to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hillary. I think I have a lot of questions, but we want to open it up and hear from anybody in the audience who might have questions for Hillary about her work. While we are waiting, I would love to hear about your journey from flash fiction to prose poetry, and maybe define both of those for me, because I still have questions about that every time.
Oh, who knows? No, but I originally started out in creative nonfiction, but I guess I just got more more interested in flash fiction at the time. And I had a wonderful mentor, Kathy Fish, who I call the queen of flash fiction. But it was just time-based. I didn't, I was raising my son who was very little, and I was working 3 to 4 side jobs, and I just didn't have time. And so flash fiction was an easy, quick way to write something, because it's flash, it's very short. But what I really was into, and still am very much so, is creative nonfiction and hybrid forms, and then of course discovering prose poetry opened up a whole new world for me. Just so much freedom with prose poetry that I love, and so many authors that I just adore that write prose poetry. And the difference mainly, I think, is flash fiction still contains those elements of a story, of fiction. It has to have, well, it doesn't have to, but an arc, and usually a beginning and an ending. Of course, these are I'm not a big rule person, so these can be broken, of course. And prose poetry is just a whole other world, where, like with Huckleberry that I read, the Val Kilmer one, that's one of my favorites because it's so absurd and surreal. It reminds me of that scene from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory when they all step into that moment where you could eat everything. I just feel like in prose poetry, you can just be as surreal and absurd as you want. And you're like, oh yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. So yeah. So that's why I love prose poetry. And flash fiction is an extremely difficult genre. It seems like it could be super easy because it's short, And that just makes it so much harder. So yeah, I really admire anyone who can write that form.
And we have a question from Star about asking what's your process like, what your writing process.
Oh, well, Natanya and I were talking about this in her class today about, I mentioned that phrase and I couldn't remember it exactly. I still can, is if you're not a real writer, or unless you write every day, whatever that phrase is, and I can't remember it. I don't do that. I do not do that. I don't write every day. Even if I weren't super busy, I don't think I would write every day. But what I do is, if I get interested in what I want to write about, and I research it. I love researching, and I don't mean that in like the sterile, boring scientific way, because I am so not a scientist. But like with the firmament piece, I've always loved Nikola Tesla. And so I wanted to write a piece kind of weaving him in and facts about him. And so that was really interesting for me. So I just started researching everything I could on Nikola Tesla and his life, and just took notes. And as I'm doing the research, my creative part, brain, whatever you want to call your creative side, just starts firing, and that's my writing process. I get interested in something, I research it, and that is kind of what gets me going with writing that specific project. And the way I can tell if it's going to work out or not is if I start researching something, I could take a ton of notes and then it just flops. And then I know I'll save it, but then I know it's not meant to be.
And I think that Nate Marshall's question is a great follow-up to what you're talking about here. He says, I love this connection of the nature of electricity to the seizure and then childbirth. Are there more pieces thinking about Tesla or about about electricity, both literally and as metaphor?
I haven't written any quite like that, although I am working on a new project with those connections. I am so interested in the way the brain operates with seizures, and how it's like an electrical storm inside our brains, and how much Tesla also loved lightning. He was born during a lightning storm. He spent his whole life creating lightning, the Tesla coil. And I'm not sure if a lot of you know this, but Tesla lived in Colorado Springs. He had a lab down there. Unfortunately, the city sold it, and now there's a family living in there, which is sad. And that might have been part of my obsession with Nikola Tesla's. I was born and raised in Colorado Springs, and I knew about it. But it's those kind of things that are just so interesting. It's like I was never really a scientific person, and I'm still not. But if I can find some kind of a really weird, interesting connection and write about it, like that's what really interests me. So I am working on a project more about the epileptic brain and how that operates, and not just the epileptic brain, but how our brains, those of us who aren't epileptic, the firing of the brains, and how nobody knows much of anything about the brain. And it's so mysterious and interesting and how it operates. So yeah, I'm going to start working on that project soon. And of course, I'm going to connect it to ghosts and other things. So yeah, great question. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Brandon Shimoda has a question for you. He says it may be too meta for a reading, but I like this question. He wanted to know what your relationship to reading your work in public or for an audience, and to know more about that. Does it play a part in your creative process? Does it lead you to new discoveries about what you've written? And one way when I hear this question, I also think about the work that you do for at the Inkwell in Denver, hosting readings there, hosting a lot of virtual readings, and being part of a writing community in Denver that has a lot of performance-based activities and events and things.
Yeah, right. Yeah, great question. Thank you so much, Brandon. There's some pieces that I have made a big mistake of reading during a reading, and it was just too emotional. Like I'm pumping myself up thinking this will be fine. So not fine. And I'm sure it makes a good show for the audience, but as you know, it's very hard to, when you don't have control of your emotions when you're reading something, and that's very difficult. So I have learned over the years, even though a piece is great and beautiful, and I want to read it out loud, I can't, because there's just some topics that are just too difficult to read out loud as much as I want to. The pieces I read tonight are just as difficult, but I feel so connected with them now because I'm working on the final drafts of the memoir with my publisher. Bless Kevin Samsel, just going over and over it with me. But it's also important for me, and just being a part of, so many readings and hosting a reading series for so long, to see these different authors come through and read their work and just feel the power that they're giving off as they're reading. And I think that's really important. And I don't even want to say, well, one person can just jump in and do that right off the bat. And certainly they can, but sometimes it takes years to be able to do that and do it really well, to the point where you're able to convey that emotion or that power when you're reading. And it doesn't always happen for me specifically, unless maybe I just get worked up about something, or, I get really emotional about something and I falter or stumble on a word, and that's okay. Because I just think it makes it more real and genuine. And, some of the best readers I've seen share slides or photos or something from their lives, and they just connect it. And it's just absolutely astounding to me. And Brandon, I loved your reading most recently. I just love things like that. So it's just being genuine, I think, and just being really open to sharing who you are with the audience, and not knowing what to expect a reaction, right? But that's okay. Because in the end, just sharing words is just an act of power, I think. And I'm just always so grateful to be able to do so, and just to keep learning from watching others read too. I love it. So yeah, great question. Thank you.
I really loved hearing that, and appreciate it. I have a tendency to not recognize what is going to be emotional before I read it, until I'm in the moment of reading. And then I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm saying this right now. Or how do I backtrack here? And you can't, you kind of have to go forward. But like you said, like that faltering and the kinds of, taking up like a genuine space in those moments becomes so important. And yeah, I think that Brandon also just does like a wonderful job of using images and slides and kind of bringing everybody into this space.
Absolutely.
I'd like to hear a little bit about your genres. You have, so you've moved from fiction or flash fiction to prose poetry, which you talked about, but you also have fiction out, short fiction, and a memoir you're working on. You have a poetry book that also has hybrid work in it as well. So do you find yourself kind of working towards a genre, or do you kind of let genre happen and do something with it later? Or how does that go for you?
I'm all over the place, I'll admit it. I always get myself geared up, like I'm going to write this literary fiction novel, and I go out and read all these really cool literary fiction novels, and I volunteer to be a beta reader for my friends who are writing literary fiction novels, and I'm gearing myself up, and then I start doing my research, which is always my first step, right? And then it just flops. And you know, I think it's like this, okay, well, I've done these three things, so now I should write a literary fiction novel. Come to find out, no, apparently I should not be doing that, because I have strayed so far beyond that project I had in my mind for a year. And now I'm just moving towards something much different. And I think it's just me trying to fit myself into a certain genre where I steer myself wrong. And I'm beginning to realize that, like I said in your class today, Natanya, like, you're always learning. And we should never, when we think, oh, we're done, I don't need to learn anymore, that's when we're in trouble, right? And I'm always learning. And I think that includes learning about yourself as a human being, first and foremost, and how your writing connects with who you are as a human at that point in time. And I think for me, it's just, there's too much exploration to be done that I desperately need to find out and write about. The whole idea behind the epileptic brain and the ghost box and Tesla and lightning and the supernatural is just so fascinating to me. And that draw is just too great for me to turn my back to and try and write a literary fiction novel. Even if I were to incorporate those themes into that novel, I just don't think it would work, because it feels too confining for me. And that's why I love the hybrid form, is it doesn't feel like there's any rules. I can do whatever I want. So that's what's so interesting and exciting for me, is just to be able to explore that possibility and feel okay with that, and not feel like I have to do something just because I feel like I have to do it. Like, what fun is that, right? So yeah, and who knows what will happen, you know? I mean, you know, as you start a writing project, it could go in 20 different ways, and you never know. And that's probably one of the beauties in writing, is you think you know at one point what you're going to do, and then it totally leads off into another totally fascinating direction. That's just one of the things I love about writing the most.
It makes me think about the way that you incorporate a lot of different kinds of, I guess, approaches in your writing process, but editing. I mean, um, your editing, I guess, company is called Alchemy, right? And I know you do tarot, which I'm fascinated with. And how do you see all these things coming together? I mean, they obviously come together because that's you. But you know, did you always imagine that you'd be at this point where you are offering all these different kinds of, you know, services in ways that are meaningful for you, and then also writing and also editing and teaching and all those kinds of things?
Absolutely not. I I I'm just like trying to find words right now. Even I had no idea this was going to happen. You know, when I first started out, moved to Denver from Colorado Springs, and was trying to start writing, and I had my son, and it was just me and him, and I'm working, you know, I was working as a maid, I was working as a private investigator, all these weird different side jobs. And I was just trying to get to the point where I at least had some kind of a writing community, which I did find in Denver. I've been very lucky. But I lost my job during the pandemic. I was working in a cancer lab on Anschutz medical campus. And, you know, it's terrifying to lose your job, and who knew we were going to be in a global pandemic, right? But, you know, to lose your job in the middle of that, and you're left with a lot of time and feeling frantic and feeling that brainwash of capitalism just continually beat you down. Like, you need to get a job. It doesn't matter what job you get. You just go out and you get a job. You need a job. And I felt the guilt of that a lot. But I was very lucky to have, people that supported me in the decision to start my own business editing. And at that point, I had had enough years under my belt to be able to do so. And it didn't flop. I like wake up every morning like it's still in existence. I'm getting clients all the time, and it's been very successful for almost 2 years now, and it's just crazy. And to have the opportunity to teach, like at DU, to teach it at Colorado College, I mean, no, I never, even now, I just wake up and think, what the hell? Like, what? I just feel so lucky. And, I don't know. All I know is there's a lot of dues that were paid. I'm still paying a lot of dues. I'm still doing a lot of my homework. I never float. I always am studying or learning or doing something to ensure that the opportunities keep coming, because I want them so badly. And I want to be able to help other people and teach and do all of the things, and these things take time. If you look at the timeline, it's been a very, very long time. But I am grateful so much for everything and everyone that's helped me. So I would never, ever go back to that cubicle ever again. Never. So, yeah.
Well, we're happy to have you. And I have a question here from Stephen Hayward. It's a longer one. Given the interplay between the visible and invisible, the mapped and the unmapped in your work, it's interesting that there survives no moving images of Tesla, no film of the sort that we have, say, of Edison. Is part of the attraction of writing and thinking about Tesla in that blank space into which the writer might enter? Are there other spaces between the facts that you've encountered in your research that resonate in a similar way?
With specifically Tesla, yes, I definitely went off on a research tangent with his research into the ghost radio and all of that. And he's just such a fascinating man. Just inventing all different kinds of things. And, mainly he's just known for the Tesla coil, but he did so much more and wound up dying broke and alone. It's just so sad. And yeah, absolutely. There's just so much digging and research to do with all of these things. And it's easy to fall down that rabbit hole, right? There's just when you're researching anything, it's so easy to fall down that rabbit hole and just get distracted. But for me, I've learned, God, that takes so much time. So it's really important to stay focused. But the supernatural will always fascinate me. Always. I'm a sucker for that. And any kind of scientific connection with the supernatural, for sure. So there's always going to be that element of the supernatural in my writing, because it's always been a part of my life too, ever since I was a child. So these things are important and fascinating to me, and I love to write about them. I would love to write about all of them, but staying focused is important. So yes, absolutely. Definitely could go off on a Nikola Tesla tangent forever, but I can't. So
I have a book of his, of his notebooks, right? I'm sure you've seen it, which I thought would bring me closer to understanding him, and it just made it even harder. So it makes me think about this kind of this blank, empty space of trying to get to him, along with those ghost voices that are always there, right? Like reading these notes of a ghost that are still haunting us, but also not knowing how to get closer to it or anything. So
oh yeah, you just nailed that. Yeah, he was such a complex human. And it's like the more you try and research him, the harder it is to understand him. So yeah.
And then it's like you said, like somebody else is like living in his house now, right?
I know, and they're probably like, I have no idea. And, you know, so frustrating. I'm still so upset about that. Colorado Springs, so upset at you.
Well, while you're here, I hope we can scout it out.
Right? Peek in the windows.
Awesome. Do we have any other final questions, or I think we've covered quite a few things. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Hillary, for being here. And you know, Hillary will be here next block. So students that want to meet up with her, talk to her, you know, just let me know, let the English department know. We'll have our office hours and contact information in the coming block. So thank you again so much for reading. Appreciate
Well,
it.
thank you for the opportunity, and thank you everyone who, you know, spent part of their night here with me. I appreciate it very much so. So thank you.
And also nobody report us for stalking the home of Tesla when you're down here later. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us and for your continued support of the Visiting Writers series. So next week we have 2 Visiting Writers events, and you should be able to see them on the screen now. They're both in the Cornerstone screening room at 5 p.m. and they'll be streamed as well. And you can always go to our website to learn more about the events that are coming up this block, to see recordings, and our listserv is also available there. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.